From the end of World War I to the start of World War II. From a painter living on the streets of Vienna to one of the most powerful men in the world. This is the story of Adolf Hitler. The year is 1918. With the announcement of Germany's surrender, an era of peace would be ushered in. World War I was called the Great War, the war to end all wars, but with the bitter German loss and Draconian Treaty of Versailles, it was only a prelude for what was to come. The loss came as a shock to the populace, a discrepancy between what was reported to them and the military reality. General Ludendorff founded the stab-in-the-back myth, Durchstoß, claiming the loss was due to the infestation of Marxist socialist propaganda that hindered the soldiers, even when victory was allegedly certain. The signing of the armistice in November, by whom were later called the November Criminals, sealed the people's fate. Revolution erupted. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated his throne. Eventually, the fledgling Weimar Republic was founded. The revolution was seen as the child of organized treason by those who were believed to have lost Germany the war. To make matters worse, the Weimar Republic had not only the burden of reparations, but also the distrust left over from its predecessor, the German Empire. The economy that the Weimar Republic inherited was already ravaged, but their decision to print money exacerbated the problem. With the Great Depression, unemployment rose exponentially, and governmental deflationary measures failed. The people were left with only the political extremes, their choices being the far right or the far left. You can guess who they chose. Adolf Hitler lived in Austria during his childhood. After his dreams of becoming an artist were dashed, he lived on the streets of Vienna, painting postcards for a living. The more he read the anti-Semitic rhetoric in newspapers, the more he could see the reasons why his people, spread across Europe, were separated. The Jews and the Communists united in the form of Jewish Bolshevism. Participating in World War I, only to see his great people and king fall, left him with bitter resentment and drove him to politics. His entry point, the reconnaissance unit. His first task, infiltrate the German Workers' Party. While he initially thought they were socialists, his very first meeting there proved him wrong. They were fascists, and they shared much of his ideology. After a stunning presentation of the 25 points giving the party a clear program, he became the leader and renamed it to the National Socialist Democratic Party, or the Nazi Party for short, and drew his famous artwork, the swastika logo. He formed the Sturmabteilung, or the SA, a paramilitary organization comprising of unemployed soldiers that would protect future speeches and disrupt political opponents. When he felt confident enough, Hitler tried to start a revolution, inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome. He failed and was jailed for treason in the Landsberg prison. There, he put his writing skills to the task and wrote what would become the Bible of Nazi ideology, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. His failure was a lesson. Violence wasn't the way to power. It would be through politics. After leaving prison, he was still politically inconsequential. What attributed to initial rise to power were factors not directly related to World War I. Rather, it relied on two major principles. The first was that Germany was never truly democratic. The German Empire, the predecessor to the Weimar Republic, was an autocratic monarchy despite being a democracy in name. Hitler, unlike his contemporaries, had no problem with assuming the position of the sole leader, and the people would have no problem with a dictator. The second was the Great Depression. When the government proved incapable of dealing with the crisis, the workers started to support the communists, and the middle class, wary of his recent development, started to support the fascist Nazis. Hitler already reflected public sentiment. For one thing, he re-sparked the stab-in-the-back myth and further capitalized on the widely believed war guilt lie, a belief that Germany was not responsible for the Great War. Its acts were done in self-defense, and the Treaty of Versailles that held Germany solely accountable was an attempt to reduce the German to subservience. Hitler also advocated Lebensraum, living space. Inspired by Darwinian theory, nations are in a struggle of survival amongst one another, and only the fittest would win. Autarky, a self-sufficient economy, was one way to win this battle. Democracy, a force that had given power to what Hitler believed to be inferior races like the Slavs and Jews, had to be abolished in order to restore Germany to greatness. With the aftermath of World War I, Hitler's emotional message of uniting all German people under the Reich, like those in Austria and Czechoslovakia, appealed to many. His fierce attack on the Treaty of Versailles was met with widespread sympathy. His presence on stage gave the image of strength and stability. Whether or not people were committed to every aspect of his ideology, Hitler started to rise in popularity. His speeches were not the only part of his campaign. He constructed a shadow government in preparation for power, departmentalizing the Nazi movement. The cabinet consisted of Hitler and his advisors, a propaganda department controlled by Joseph Goebbels, a defense organization run by the stormtroopers, and the protection guards, among other departments. Hitler ran for presidency against Paul von Hindenburg, but lost to the World War I general. President Hindenburg's confidence feared the rise of communism and thought coming to terms with the Nazis was key. Two governments, headed first by Franz von Papen, then by Kurt von Schleicher, did not win Nazi support. Hitler demanded nothing short of becoming Chancellor himself. Papen advised Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor and Papen as Vice-Chancellor. He assured Hindenburg that he could control Hitler. Hindenburg, already frustrated by Schleicher, conceded and elected Hitler as Chancellor in 1933. Papen could not control Hitler. The Reichstag fire, which was blamed on the communists, was used as a pretext for Hitler to suspend constitutional guarantees and arrest political opponents to place in concentration camps. The consequent Enabling Act gave Hitler the power to rule by decree, and the Reichstag was removed as opposition. Hitler could begin Gleichschaltung, otherwise known as Nazification of all aspects of German society. This was accomplished through a series of social policies. Hitler first drew Germany out of the Great Depression through large investments in public works. While it was the Minister of Economics, Helmer Schacht, who orchestrated this, propaganda led the public to believe that it was Hitler who was their savior. This was the start of the cult of the leader. Hitler silenced the opposition. The decree of the suspension of civil rights gave the Gestapo a secret police, the right to get rid of anyone who was suspected of dissent, to weaken communism. Trade unions were dissolved and replaced by Nazi organizations. The Reichskonkordat, an agreement with the Vatican Church, also meant that the Church could no longer intervene in politics. Eventually, a one-party state where all other parties were outlawed was established. Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA, had amassed 2 million members. He wanted to go bigger by controlling the army. Hitler did not like this challenge to his authority and wanted to keep the uneasy military on his side. Alas, he purged them. While he was at it, opponents like the last Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher and George Strasser, who in the party had been second to Hitler, also met their end. People initially weren't happy with the massacre after Hitler proclaimed that he acted ruthlessly against evils that threatened their nation. His violent act was met with widespread support. When President Hindenburg died, Hitler united the positions of Chancellor and President and named himself the Führer and Reichskanzler, supreme commander of all the Reich's forces. Millions of Germans swore an oath to him, and parades flooded the streets. Soon every sector was Nazified. Education had become the Hitler Youth, where boys and girls would learn the Nazi doctrine. As for adults, they were forced to be part of Nazi associations and had a great variety to choose from. Propaganda disseminated through passionate speeches, cheap and available radios, mass rallies, newspapers, posters, books, and films maintained support. Rather infamously, people were encouraged to toss books of anti-Nazi into a fire, like the works of Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx. Other intellectuals like Albert Einstein and Thomas Mann were silenced. Hitler's support was no doubt the highest during his enactment of foreign policies. In open violation of the Treaty of Versailles, he pulled Germany out of the League of Nations, rearmed and then remilitarized the Rhineland, demonstrating the weakness of the Allies. French and British appeasement made him bolder. Hitler annexed Austria and then Czechoslovakia. These military wins demonstrated his might and power. It was his attack on Poland that eventually set off the forces leading to his fall. Every calculated action, every social policy and law passed combined to build the Führer myth. Hitler was seen as a savior, a father who was as stern as he was kind, an infallible man who upholds social justice. In Hitler's words, I overcame chaos in Germany, restored order, enormously raised production in all fields of our national economy. I succeeded in completely resettling in useful production those 7 million unemployed who so touched our hearts. I have not only politically united the German nation, but also rearmed it militarily, and I have further tried to liquidate that treaty sheet by sheet, whose 448 articles contain the vilest rape that nations and human beings have ever been expected to submit to. I have restored to the Reich the provinces grabbed from us in 1919. I have led millions of deeply unhappy Germans who have been snatched away from us back into the fatherland. I have restored the 1,000-year-old historical unity of German living space, and I have attempted to accomplish all that without shedding blood and without inflicting the suffering of war on my people or any other. I have accomplished all this as one who 21 years ago was still an unknown worker and soldier of my people by my own efforts. His acts and messages appealed to everyone, not just to Nazis. Hitler had acted at the perfect moment, the transitionary period where the monarchy was abolished and the republic insecure. The power Hitler had so rapidly established upon his chancellorship, one that he expanded and consolidated into a cult of the leader unlike any other, is a testimony to his prowess. Be that as it may, the Germans who had so ardently supported him were now grimly sentenced to another 50 years of disaster.